Lift the ban on rent control in Massachusetts. Hi, my name is Pampi. I was a Boston resident for 24 years, then after struggling the last 7 years with housing security as a culture worker, I moved towards Western Mass due to pressures of losing my beloved father to aggressive cancer as the pandemic began. Arranging his last hospital stay and transition to hospice with hospitals spitting people out to bring in people suffering from COVID. I have no words. Losing my day job, becoming gig insecure as a performer, and the prospect of being able to afford the rent I was paying as a result of all of this due to the pandemic. In less than 2 years, I moved twice to eventually stabilize enough to relocate to Holyoke, Massachusetts. I am in favor of H 1378 S 886 and H 1440 S 889. Both bills would end the ban on rent control. It is shameful we even need to testify to this by milking our designed impoverishedness, not the least of which is rooted in policies supporting the redlining and gentrification for legislative sympathy. All people should have a safe and dignified place to call home. A home is a human right, and more, it is an anchor to family and community and a platform for health, well-being, and economic success. The COVID-19 pandemic has proven without a doubt that safe and stable housing is critical for people's health and safety. 27 years ago, big real estate poured millions of dollars into a referendum in which a narrow majority of voters banned rent control in Massachusetts. A generation later, and in year 3 of the pandemic, rents have continued to rise across Massachusetts in an accelerated fashion. Since 2010, the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom in Massachusetts has increased by 55%. This forces too many families to live in overcrowded conditions, drains resources from local economies, and pushes people out of their own neighborhoods. Many of these households are made out of essential workers we enjoy hollow applauding for courage, but bureaucratically abandoned to wide-ranging negative economic impacts, including an increased risk for COVID-19 transmission related to living in overcrowded housing conditions, congregate facilities, or on the street. It is infuriating to have to be begging for our humanity and lives at this point that we need to calmly and diplomatically convey that predatory real estate profit is not worth the intergenerational trauma caused by gentrification and racist housing policies. As I have personally testified, communities across Massachusetts face an affordability crisis. The percentage of residents who rent their homes is rising, while nearly half of all mass renters and over 70% of very low-income renters are burdened with unaffordable housing costs. While unsurprising, given this nation's violent past, it is incredibly troubling to see flagrant, ableist disregard for life and the recent CDC's despicable updates, which for all practical purposes are eugenics at play. Our civil liberties and rights, so hard won by our working and low-income Black and Brown communities already tissue thin, is now being gleefully and willfully gouged as an international spectacle. There is nothing mild about COVID-19, Omicron or otherwise. Mass's winter surge, one of the highest in the nation. Communities with the highest risk of eviction also tend to have the highest rates of COVID-19 infections, yet the lowest rates of vaccination. There's absolutely no justification for risking lives before housing is stable, and frontline communities, communities of color, and low-income communities are equally protected from COVID-19. Housing is a matter of protecting public health. Residents' right to housing is essential to COVID-19 crisis and recovery. As with every civil rights effort, the people most vulnerable are leading the charge for decades for equitable housing recovery. We need Massachusetts legislators to allow cities, towns, and the people to do what is best for their communities and lift the ban on rent control now. While we wait for rent control and tenant protections, we need them to immediately pass the COVID-19 Housing Equity Bill H 1434 S 891 to prevent even more people from losing their homes due to the pandemic. Bill H 4229 is a home rule petition to allow Boston to protect tenants in expiring use buildings with tools including rent control. So please, please do what is right and do it now. Thank you.